Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about what I see as a looming massive transfer of wealth away from the Western citizenry and into the hands of the big corporations, particularly the big banks and the financial concerns. Now, this will happen through use of climate change legislation that will be forced on us by our supposed political representatives, and they'll force onerous climate change and energy efficiency, save the planet and all that sort of stuff. They'll enforce that on us in all private dwellings, residential real estate, where the upgrades will be substantial. The upgrades to energy efficiency that they'll demand will be substantial, to the point where it'll be beyond the reach of anything other than the wealthiest 1 or 2%. Why is this important, and why is it relevant in the overall sort of globalization scheme of things? One of the biggest things that makes a middle class is having a stake in the future, owning property, owning a business, having children, these sorts of things. These are all people having a stake in the future. And this is very much what a middle class is built around. If you have no real stake in the future, then you're much less likely to think that your society and the things around you are important. You're much less likely to think that levels of governance and equal application of the law, you'd be less likely thinking about those things because you'd be too busy surviving day to day. And it requires a certain amount of time to be able to think in the abstract, and having families and having property and or a business or a career sort of employment. These are all things where there's a stake in the future. Now, once you start taking those things away, then people have a much lesser or indeed no stake in the future. And that's when you cease to have a citizen-based middle class. Now, that's already well underway in the West. The globalists are going hard at it. And again, as they've taken over all Western governments, they're able to use our own fellow citizens in the guise of our elected representatives to actually work so hard and so tirelessly and so eagerly to disenfranchise us all in various levels. But I just want to focus in this essay on the how climate change will be used, or how I believe it will be used. Now, if we look at say the European Union in particular, that's a completely captured globalist entity and non-accountable. They're definitely not accountable to anybody. They're talking about in Britain and Germany and so on. They're talking about Holland of quite onerous requirements to achieve what they say is energy efficiency. Now, my experience with a lot of European residential real estate is that the windows tend to be smaller, the walls tend to be thicker, and this sort of thing, certainly in Western Europe, and therefore there's a certain sort of inbuilt level of energy efficiency. Small windows tend to let out less heat, for example, in winter, less heat than larger windows do. There's certainly been a very open plan design attitude to a lot of buildings, say, in the 80s and beyond, so which would require more energy to heat, and I do understand that, or more energy to cool, for that matter. So the design of houses has changed and recently, and in the old English 2 up and 2 down sort of stone cottage, the walls, the stone is so thick and the windows so small that it's quite easy and efficient to heat in the winter. You wouldn't need much. And I've been in houses in winter in the north of England, even where the heating again, the buildings have been, I think, designed to suit the colder weather. But anyway, the government can decide on what represents energy efficiency. So they can put in any criteria they say for energy efficiency. All windows must be triple glazed or have a certain sort of gas in between the glass panes of the glazed windows, or a certain sort of substance or material that to be used for insulating ceilings and so on. Certain types of heating that the heating can't be central heating in as much, say, a block of apartments or something, can't be central heating because there's too much heat lost in the pipes as it travels around from the central boiler. And they can introduce all sorts of criteria to say, well, you have to now meet this standard. Now, for new houses being built, that's not so much of an issue. It will add cost, but some imaginative design and some reconsidering and reimagining certain sort of how to go about things. So new buildings, it's not as much of an issue, but these governments are discussing retrofitting or applying these stringent insulation standards or energy efficiency standards, as they put it, to older buildings. Now, I'll just sort of reference in Australia, in one of the coldest areas of Australia. And yes, Australia does have cold areas where it does snow quite frequently and temperatures drop below zero, certainly at night time. And so this is a building built in the 1970s. I wouldn't call it completely open plan, but it's probably not an optimal design for a cold climate. But just upgrading that house, which isn't a huge house, but it's two-story, 3-bed type house. They had to spend more than probably 25% of the total value, or the then value of the property anyway. So, and this is in things putting in like triple glazed windows and so on. So it's a lot of money. Now, if you've got a booming real estate sort of hysterical price rises, you can probably build that into the price, and it's not so punitive. But you need for a private residence, you need a certain amount of cash before you can do that. Now, where the legislation for energy efficiency appears to be going is it's going to be forced. It's not going to be optional. So you're not going to be able to sell your house until it reaches a certain energy efficiency standard. Now, if you can't afford that, and not everybody can, not everyone's got a spare $100,000 lying around, or 200,000, or whatever it might be. And if you're looking at a $1 million property, you can be looking at 20-25% of the value. So you certainly have to splash out a lot of cash. You've got large French windows at a single pane. If you're going to refit those into double or triple glazing is the requirement, the gold standard, then you're looking at a lot of money for big windows like that. Or you have to brick in the area and have smaller windows, or have no French windows at all, and the like. So the cost of it's going to be high. Now, as a private citizen, you have to just get that money out of your own pocket, or you have to get a loan, and you have to hope that you can sell the house. Like when you add on the 20-25% of the insulation, you hope you can sell the house and at least get back that money. So I don't think that, it's a very small percentage of the population can actually afford that. So they can do one of two things. They have to get a loan and redo the house, and then carry that loan, have to make payments while they're negotiating the sale of the property. Or they have to sell to the banks, or a business such as a specialist property developer, green property developer. So they have to sell it to them, and those people have an exemption because they're able to say, well, we'll buy it, but we agree that we'll do all all the upgrading for insulation before we put it up for sale. If indeed we do put it up for sale, we might hang on to the property and just rent it, for example. And they will get all sorts of tax exemptions for that. So if they've got to spend $250,000 doing an upgrade, which nearly every property would need, other than the most recently sort of built and developed, so every property is going to need some sort of cost applied to it to reach these energy efficiency, climate change friendly standards. Then only these big companies will be able to buy the property. And again, it won't cost them anything because they'll be able to write it off on their tax. So they can buy it and do these upgrades and it will cost them nothing. Now, when they write it off on tax, what that means is the taxpayer, the person who's just been screwed over their property in the first place, they will, people like them, they're paying these banks to actually implement the green, the green project, as it were, the globalist green project there, and it's just coming out of the citizens' tax. So in effect, the citizens paying for it anyway, whether it's through the front door or the back door. But what this will mean, in my view at least, what this will mean is that property, many citizens will not be able to afford to hang on to the property, and will have to sell, and the only interchange, if you like, of the property handling and the climate change upgrading stuff will be the big property developers, the big banks, and those multinational organizations that have a crony, intimate relationship with these governments that are enforcing these regulations. But the end result will be the citizen will be losing their property. So whereas, in some countries you've got 50, 60, 70% in the West of citizens that are either own or in the process of attempting to own their own property, their residential real estate. The vast majority of those won't be able to hang on to it. Retired pensioners won't have the funds to do it, so it'll cause a big transfer of wealth away from the citizenry to these big banks and so on, which in turn will accelerate the globalization process as it creates yet more people who have no stake in the future and view the future as being one of abject futility. There's nothing good going to happen in the future. Why do I care? That sort of apathy, which is what the globalists want. I mean, it's to the globalists, this is gold dust, because it just means there are fewer and fewer people, those damn straight white males, fewer and fewer people that are going to object to the globalist project or find flaw in it. And there's no shortage of flaws in the globalist project. So I think that's it. Now already, the advocates for this in the European Union, in particular, they seem to be the keenest on it. They're already saying, well, anyone that opposes this is a fucking Nazi. You're a fucking fascist white supremacist. You are Hitler. If you oppose triple glazed windows in your home, you are fucking Hitler. And this is where, but that's all window dressing. The real issue, as I see it, is this is a device that is cynically being used to disenfranchise Western private property owners, and I think that's exactly how it's going to be used. You've been a Tacitus to that, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.